He catalogued every god Rome ever worshipped. He documented every ritual, every temple, every sacred tradition. And then Augustine used his own scholarship to demolish Roman religion from within. Marcus Terentius Varro was, by universal ancient agreement, the most learned Roman who ever lived. Born in 116 BC, he wrote over 600 books on subjects ranging from agriculture to grammar, from geography to philosophy. But his masterwork, the one that consumed his greatest intellectual energy, was the Antiquitates Rerum Humanarum et Divinarum, the Antiquities of Human and Divine Things. In 41 books, he attempted to preserve the entire cultural and religious heritage of Rome. The Antiquities was divided into two great sections. The first 25 books covered human affairs, the history, institutions, geography, and calendar of Rome. The second 16 books covered divine affairs, the gods, the priests, the sacred places, the festivals, and the rituals. Varro dedicated the divine section to Julius Caesar, who was then Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome. The work was encyclopedic in scope and meticulous in detail, a vast catalogue of everything Romans believed and practiced. The Antiquities is almost entirely lost. No complete copy survives. We know the work primarily through two sources. A handful of quotations by the grammarian Nonius Marcellus, and far more extensively through Augustine's City of God, which preserves large sections by quoting them in order to refute them. The irony is bitter. Rome's greatest work of self-documentation survives mainly in a Christian polemic against everything it represented. Varro's most influential idea was his division of theology into three kinds. Mythical theology is the theology of the poets, the stories of gods quarreling, loving, and transforming told by Homer and Hesiod. Natural theology is the theology of the philosophers, rational speculation about the nature of the divine. Civil theology is the theology of the state, the official cults, rituals, and institutions that the Roman people actually practice. This tripartite division became one of the most consequential ideas in the history of religious thought. Varro argued that civil theology came first in practice, even if natural theology was truer in theory. The state needs religion to function. People need rituals, temples, and shared worship to maintain social cohesion. It does not matter whether the myths are literally true. What matters is that citizens participate in the public cult. Varro was not a cynical manipulator. He genuinely valued Roman tradition, but his frank admission that civil religion served political rather than philosophical ends would prove fatal when Augustine got hold of it. Varro catalogued the Roman gods with extraordinary thoroughness. He distinguished the decerti, the gods with clearly defined functions like Jupiter, Mars, and Venus, from the deincerti, the obscure divinities whose names and functions had been forgotten. He listed gods of doorways, gods of hinges, gods of thresholds. There were gods for every stage of human life, for a child's first words, first steps, first food. Rome's divine bureaucracy was as elaborate as its human one. The Roman religious calendar was a vast network of festivals, sacrifices, and observances. Varro documented them all: the Lupercalia in February, the Saturnalia in December, the Parentalia for honoring the dead, the Vestalia for the sacred flame. Each festival had its proper rites, its proper victims for sacrifice, its proper prayers and formulas. To miss a word in a prayer was to invalidate the ritual. Roman religion was a system of precise legal obligations between humans and gods. Varro catalogued Rome's temples, shrines, and sacred groves with the precision of an archivist. He traced the founding of each temple, the god to whom it was dedicated, the magistrate who built it, and the ceremonies performed within it. Many of these temples were already ancient and decaying in Varro's time. He saw himself as a preserver, rescuing a vanishing heritage from oblivion. Without his work, much of what we know about Roman sacred topography would have been lost entirely. Behind the civil religion, Varro held a sophisticated philosophical theology drawn from Stoicism. He believed the world soul was the true divine reality, the rational fire that pervades all things. The individual gods were aspects or manifestations of this single divine principle. Jupiter was the world's soul itself, Juno was the air, Neptune was the sea. The whole elaborate mythology was, at bottom, a poetic way of describing natural forces. This allegorical interpretation allowed Varro to be both a philosopher and a patriot, honoring the gods while understanding them rationally. Augustine of Hippo devoted books VI through X of the City of God to a systematic engagement with Varro's Antiquities. He had enormous respect for Varro's learning, calling him the most acute and most learned of men. But respect did not prevent demolition. Augustine saw in Varro's own framework the tools to dismantle Roman religion. If Varro himself admitted that civil theology was politically useful rather than philosophically true, then Rome's own greatest scholar confessed that Roman religion was a noble lie. Augustine easily dispatched mythical theology. If the poet's stories are literally true, the gods are adulterers, thieves, and murderers, unworthy of worship. If they are allegories, they mislead the common people who take them literally. Varro himself had criticized mythical theology as unworthy of philosophers. Augustine simply pressed the point: if Rome's own scholars reject the myths, why should anyone else accept them? Civil theology was harder to attack because it was defended not as true but as useful. Augustine's response was devastating. A religion that its own defenders admit is false cannot be truly useful. It corrupts the people by training them to worship what they know is not real. Varro's separation of civil from natural theology is itself the confession that civil religion is a fraud. The Roman people worship gods that their own philosophers do not believe in. This is not piety, it is organized deception. Even natural theology, Augustine argued, fails. The Stoic world soul is not God, it is part of the cosmos, not its creator. A God who is the universe cannot be worshipped because you are already part of it. Natural theology correctly perceives that there must be a divine reality behind the cosmos, but it cannot identify that reality as a personal creator who acts in history. For that, you need not philosophy but revelation, not Varro but scripture. Augustine seized on a remarkable passage in which Varro expressed regret that Roman religion had developed as it did. Varro wished he could have founded Roman religion on natural theology rather than civil theology, on philosophical truth rather than political custom. Augustine saw this as the most powerful admission possible. Rome's greatest religious scholar wished Roman religion were different from what it was. The patient is diagnosing his own disease, but only Christianity offers the cure. Varro's tripartite theology became a standard framework in Christian apologetics. Eusebius of Caesarea used it. Augustine systematized it. It was invoked throughout the Middle Ages whenever Christians needed to explain and critique pagan religion. The framework survived even after Varro's own text was lost, transmitted through Augustine's quotations into the permanent vocabulary of Christian theology. Varro's intellectual honesty became, paradoxically, the most effective weapon against the religion he sought to preserve. Varro's Antiquities represents one of the great might-have-beens of intellectual history. Had it survived intact, it would be our most comprehensive source for Roman religion, institutions, and culture. Instead, we have fragments, brilliant, tantalizing fragments, preserved mainly by the man who used them to argue that everything Varro cherished was a magnificent error. The most learned Roman's greatest work endures as evidence in the case against Rome. Augustine's City of God is, in a sense, the Antiquities' afterlife, the Christian transformation of Rome's most ambitious act of cultural self-understanding.